In this week's episode of Natural AF, we talk about how not doing some things is probably the best thing that you can do. This episode is all about being unvaxxed and unschooled with Aneeta Hafemeister. And for Natural AF, I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm your other host, Alexa.
And together we are diving into what it means to be fully human, fully present and embodied in this experience called life, and what it means to be fully natural AF.
I actually love this episode for the topic of being natural AF because it doesn't get more natural AF than being unvaxxed and unschooled.
And I think this will be a good episode for parents to learn to relax. It's going to be okay. The things that they tried to scare you about are not that scary once you're on the other side.
Yeah. And I think this is such an important conversation because as we talk about a lot on this show, a lot of this coming back to who we truly are and reconnecting to our natural state of being is a process of deconditioning and reconditioning, reprogramming the subconscious mind. And what a better way to not have to have your kids go through that than by just not putting them in school? Because as we now know, we receive so much programming and societal conditioning through the various stages of school that we go through. And I don't know about everyone else. Most people I speak to can relate to this, but school is just not a really nice place, especially now. I think it's gotten so much worse. Obviously, we don't have kids in the system now, but I hear a lot of stories and it's gotten a lot worse. Bullying seems to have gotten worse, especially now with the internet. Like kids go home and they can't really escape it. And it's really not a nice place. So having this knowledge, and really loved hearing Aneeta's experience of this because there is this misconception that it's really hard to homeschool your kids. And the way that Aneeta talks about her experience with her children and the way she's raised them, to me, it just seems like the much easier way, and just letting the kids sort of be more self-directed in their learning and just letting them naturally gravitate towards the things that they're really interested in and not having to force things down their throat. So I absolutely love this conversation, and love hearing from people that have done this because we've definitely met a lot of kids that have not gone through schooling, and they're just the best, most well-rounded kids I think I've ever met.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not easier. It's probably more difficult, but the difficult part isn't teaching the kids. The difficult part is letting go and deconditioning yourself as a parent, saying, I'm doing the right thing. It's so interesting because my daughter went through some of this. She's doing less and she's learning more. It's completely the opposite. We've been conditioned to think that you have to go to school for 6 to 8 hours a day. And that's, you should do extra. You should do before school activities, after school activities, do extra credits and do more. And we talk about in this episode how you can do a couple hours a day and you will surpass every single public school in the nation.
Well, the interesting thing is too, it's like you look at extracurricular activities that kids do outside of school. It's because that's usually the stuff that they're really actually interested in. So why would we not just do more of that within the schooling system? Yeah. But as we know, the schooling system isn't designed for us to thrive. If you're hearing that for the first time, then maybe look into that. But I'm pretty sure most of our audience are on board with that. They get it. And once you know that, I mean, I know for us, like we definitely will never send our kids to school. But also,
it'd be the worst at this point. It's so wild, but it's the worst thing I could think to do to your kids. And I'm sorry if you're sending your kids to school, they'll be fine if you're a good parent and you love them and all that stuff. But it's like, I want to give my kids the best advantage. And it's sadly breaking away from what's accepted as normal. You don't want your kids to be safe in the herd. That herd is getting led to the slaughter, and I feel for them, but let that be for them. And we decide to choose a different way.
Yeah. So hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I think it's definitely opens up the mind a little more to what's possible in these realms. But before we get into it,
yeah, speaking of self-learning or unschooling, you can learn so many things by being passionate about something. And I started Natural Art Form because I was passionate about creating something for myself to help heal myself and to give my body what it needs to do what it does best. I have a passion for creating products that are the best, the cleanest, the most effective that I can make them, the simplest ingredients sourced from the best places. And so that's what we do at Natural Art Form. It's made it around the world. I just am blown away by the receptivity of it. You know, we've had people purchase from Singapore, from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, UK,
New Zealand, most recently.
So very exciting. I started a business in the United States. I have a grown daughter over there that's helping me keep the product manufactured and moving from over there. And we also manufacture it here in Australia. So it's a small family-run herbal remedy business that is on 2 continents. I came here to Australia, fell in love with Alexa, fell in love with this country, and still want to keep my business growing. So we're finding a way to make it happen. And I'm so grateful to everyone who's been a patron of ours and a customer and has been sharing our stuff on socials and letting their family and friends know about it. Much appreciated. Thank you.
So for our listeners that aren't already on our mailing list, first of all, you should be. So go to naturalartform.com and join the mailing list. We are currently running a special for the month of May where you'll get free shipping in the US. So for all of our US customers, you'll get free shipping on all orders. And again, if you're a listener, you'll get a further 10% off using the code NaturalAF10 at checkout. And this is to really help us boost some sales in the US so that we can finally get the deodorant up and running and selling in the US, which we are getting closer and closer to. And hopefully we'll have it for your guys' summer over there.
Yeah. Well, that's all the announcements and updates. Let's get into the episode.
Aneeta Hafemeister is a mother, a beef cattle farmer, and an activist for medical freedom. She grew up on a beef cattle property in North Queensland, attended boarding school in Charters Towers, and then completed a Bachelor of Animal Science at James Cook University. After her oldest child reacted adversely to a vaccine, she began researching vaccination, which started her down a busy path of activism. Aneeta currently serves as the president of the Australian Vaccination-risks Network, also known as the AVN, which has been advocating for informed consent and freedom of choice regarding vaccination since 1994. Aneeta is also passionate about education choice and has successfully unschooled all 4 of her children with promising outcomes.
Well, howdy, Aneeta. Good to see you again.
Welcome.
It's lovely to be with you. Actually, I often watch your interviews, so it's quite surreal to be here talking to you both.
Oh, wonderful.
That's awesome. Well, we're super thrilled to have you on. This is a nice follow-up to sort of having Meryl on very early on and now having you kind of like the next generation of the AVN. So for our listeners that don't know you, let's kind of dive in a little to your journey and what led you to deciding not to vaccinate your own children within your own family, and then how you became the president of the AVN.
I'll give you the long version.
Go for it.
I grew up on a cattle property in North Queensland and had always been told that vaccines, had saved the world and saved humanity, like we're all told that thing. And I've actually administered a lot of vaccines to cattle. So, over the years, I've vaccinated calves and all those things. But then when I went to boarding school when I was 13, we had a school nurse who was from South Africa. And her daughter, who was, I guess, then probably early 20s, was terribly vaccine injured by DTP vaccine when she was young, when they migrated to Australia. And I think she was 5 when she got that vaccine, it was very apparent what had happened to her. And physically she could move okay, but mentally she was like a child. And her father was her full-time carer. And I was like, oh, my goodness, like I had no idea that could happen. But people said, oh, it's okay, it's rare, it's rare. But I would see her all the time around the campus because they lived on campus. And I would always look and think, okay, it's rare, but what if it's your kid? I just couldn't. And I was a very negative person then. And I thought, just my luck, that would be my kid. So that was sort of just one of those little things in your brain that goes, ooh, I don't know about this. And then a few years later, Australian Story on the ABC, which they would never run now, they did an interview of rugby league coach Wayne Bennett. And that's when I found out that his son Justin was vaccine injured. That was also what happened to him with the DTP vaccine and seizures, and he had been permanently injured. And I was like, wow, that's 2. That's 2 of this thing I'm told is so rare, like you should never know one. So I was like, that doesn't sound right. Fast forward, I went to university and actually studied science. I actually did a Bachelor of Animal Science. So I've seen how the sausage is made on the other side of science degrees. That's why experts really don't mean anything to me at all. And I know how the indoctrination works, like, because I've been through it. I know how hard it is to unwind that out of your brain, because you think you're intelligent. You know, you think you're this smart person because you have a science degree, you know better than these little peasants. So
Totally.
yeah, so I'm glad I got that degree in hindsight, because it's been so helpful in me unpacking a lot of the vaccine stuff that we're told is, is truth. So after that, I got married, and when I was pregnant with my first child, you get told they need Hep B and all this stuff. And I just had a deep-seated bad feeling about the vaccines. I hadn't researched much at this point, but I just had a really bad feeling. Anyway, when my daughter was born, she did get the Hep B at birth, and she automatically went, like it was a natural birth. She was fine. She went straight to the breast, and then they took her away and gave her the Hep B. And not long after that, she started this terrible sound, like a cat mewling, like it was like this, like she just had this horrible sound, and she just basically screamed and projectile vomited for the first 6 weeks. And then when that stopped, she got covered in eczema. And initially at the time, I didn't put two and two together, but looking back, she was obviously encephalitic, like her brain was on fire. That was like the high-pitched screaming and the vomiting. And luckily, by this point, my deep-seated, probably mummy gut instinct on vaccines just kicked in. I'm like, you can always do them later. You can't take it back. And I was very fortunate. Oh, I should say, after the screaming stopped, she developed eczema. She developed eczema in a lot of places. And I took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, eczema, we don't know what causes that. Just slather in these steroid creams. And, by the way, she needs all these vaccines. And I went,
oh, my God.
Thanks. No, thanks. So that's probably what started my journey. Because then luckily there was a family friend gave me a copy of the AVN's book called Vaccination Roulette, which was a book that AVN put out in 1998. And I just devoured that book because I'm a book nerd. And then I joined the AVN, and they had a bookstore, and I bought every book they had. And I was just like, wow. When that curtain just drops and you can see, I was just, oh, my gosh. And I didn't doubt it. I don't know how people can read all these books and try and debunk them. Like, it's just factual stuff. Like, it's not, it's just stuff you've never been told. It was just insane to me. So then from there, I became a bit of an activist. I bought, like, if I knew young mummies in the district that were pregnant, I would buy them books from the AVN, and I'd send them letters saying, hey, I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your baby. It's just, I just wish someone had said this to me, and, all the best with your baby, and really question the Hep B, because why? Why would you get a Hep B?
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Not many of those mummies listened. And I have been an outcast in my community for a long time over that, but I haven't cared, because when children do react, I get the phone call. Like they quietly contact me and say, hey, my child's having seizures now. What do I do? So it's been great in that sense that I've been able to help people that way. And over the years, I've worked on, like, my sister-in-laws, and two of my nephews have vaccine reactions and are a little injured, but her youngest one, she stopped vaccinating and she's perfectly healthy. So,
good.
Because
so
you
good.
can't, you just have to slowly have those conversations with people, because people just aren't ready till they're ready. And it's so hard, but that's how it is. So,
and unfortunately, sorry, Aneeta, I just wanted to jump in and say, unfortunately, that's quite often they have to have the experience for themselves with one child getting injured to actually see it for themselves. And then when they choose not to with another child or future children, it's like night and day. They can see the difference, and then they just know that within themselves from that point forward. Yeah.
And I can't imagine the mummy guilt on that too. Like, that's what you see so much. They've got injured kids and the next ones are fine. They're just like, the guilt. So after Tamsin was born, I had like 3 kids under 3. So I was rather busy. But I have 4 children. So the other 3 are not vaccinated at all, and they were fine. They're perfectly healthy, and so it's just unvaccinated kids just have this amazing sparkle in their eye. It's hard to explain to people, but they're just amazing. So I joined the AVN, but I didn't join the committee until 2014. So I had always been very active with the AVN, writing letters. Whenever Merrill had a letter writing campaign to a newspaper or a politician, like, that was my favorite bit of the AVN, because all these amazing people would write all these amazing, like, educated letters. Like, it was just like, that's our community. We're told we're crazy anti-vaxxers, and they are the most amazing, educated, well-spoken, incredible people, because you have to be to go down this path, quite frankly. It's not just a whim people go down.
Right.
So, yeah, I joined the committee in 2014, and that was right as the William Thompson story broke in the US. That got covered up. That eventually became the documentary Vaxxed, about the MMR vaccine fraud. Yeah. So it was basically a whirlwind. And in 2017, we brought Polly, Tommy, and Suzanne Humphreys and Brian Hooker over for a tour with Vaxxed. And that ended up with Polly Tommy being banned from Australia under terrorism legislation.
Oh, my
How
God.
ridiculous.
Because she was a
bunch of
threat to the
clowns.
peace and good order of Australia for vaccine. You know, all she did was interview people with vaccine-injured kids. But they find that very threatening. We did get that overturned because they didn't actually have any evidence that she was a threat to the peace and good order of Australia, amazingly. But that was probably the craziest time. And then Meryl decided she needed to step down, which she has been through so much. People have no idea how much Meryl has endured over the years. So in 2019, I became the president, and the next year in 2020, we got our own Vaxxed bus in Australia, which was insane in hindsight, because in 2020, amid all the COVID crazy lockdown crap, we were touring with the bus. And that was next level insane. I'm glad we did it, but I look back now and go, yeah, we were crazy. We were crazy.
How, honestly, though, it's one of those things like you couldn't have planned it better, actually, because I think at that time with what was happening, well, maybe not in 2020, but by 2021 when the COVID vax was rolled out and so many people were getting injured and so many people started questioning, it was like this shining beacon, you know, the Vaxxed bus, and it actually couldn't have been on the road at a better time.
You were like a Paul Revere bus, just like the British are coming, just going all over Australia. Like, wake up, folks. They're getting ready to launch this whole program. And before you even knew that there was a program, you guys were telling people like,
well, I think we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when.
Yeah, that's
perfect. We knew it was coming. Yeah. Like we knew. We're like, you know what? We need to tour now. We might never be allowed to. Like we didn't know how hard it was going to be on anti-vaxxers. Because, I mean, at the start, people talk about how bad the mandates were. We were actually relieved because at the start, we honestly thought it was going to be army going door to door and vaccinating people. That was the rhetoric they had. And it was run by the army. So, you know, we were actually, people are only going to lose their jobs. That's actually pretty good. You know, which sounds horrible, but from where we were, like it ended up pretty good. But, you know, but we got banned by the Sydney City Council. We got banned by the Blue Mountains Council. We got harassed by councils everywhere we went, and police in places because we couldn't get venues, and we refused to have a COVID plan because we wouldn't kowtow to that crap. So, yeah, it was interesting. But our community was wonderful. Everywhere we went to the bus, we would just hug everyone all day because COVID was crazy and you weren't allowed near people. We just hugged our way around.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And, you know, people would have a lot of hatred online. Like the local Facebook page of whatever town you were in would just be abusing hell out of us. But people were not gutsy enough to actually come and talk to us at all. And, you know, some people just randomly come up and said, hey, what's the bus? And when they do that, you've got such an in because they come up to you. They then can't be rude to you in a way. Like, and then they're stuck there with you telling them. And a lot of them, when you tell them, they're like blown away. When you're like, oh, yeah, this person died from a vaccine and this baby died from a vaccine. The cognitive dissonance is, it was quite amazing. So it was an incredible experience. I'm glad we did it. But, yeah, it was insane in hindsight.
Yeah, and so many amazing interviews. For anyone listening, I definitely recommend going and watching some of the interviews they're all up on Rumble on the AVN's page, which we'll link in the show notes. So many, because, you know, I edited some of those that went up and just so many stories. Like, it's really sad, but at the same time, I think especially during like the COVID era, I was just like, it's unfortunate, but this really had to happen. And so the amount of people, like, and I think you guys have said it, like, it seems like more people woke up during that time than in the last 20 years.
Oh, they did. They did our job for us. Like, we couldn't, you know, big round of applause to the government. They just woke up. Like, they did our job. Like, they were great. I said to Meryl, why did you do anything for 30 years, Meryl? Like, the government just did it in a couple of years. They really screwed the pooch. It's been stunning to watch. And I tell you, when I felt the change, when we took the bus to Epic in Canberra in 2022, the amount of people that came up to the bus open and asking questions and then horrified. Like, these were people who pre-COVID would have told us we were crazy, that we were baby killers, that we were awful. And after COVID, we had thousands of people up to the bus going, oh my gosh. And when you start telling them the stories, they get it now. They get it. And the horror on their faces, like, you're like, yeah, welcome to our world. We're very sorry you had to be here. This is the club nobody wants to be in. But yeah, this is our world. And like, we couldn't have done it any better. Like, the media has just totally ruined its reputation completely. Like, it truly is people who are just really desperately want to stay asleep now that are carrying on the narrative, because it's been stunning. Although I'd have to tell you, the censorship at the start blew me away. Like, their links would disappear just as you were reading them. Like, it was, we lost our YouTube. Like, I think by March of 2020, our YouTube was gone. Facebook was almost impossible to use. We lost our first Instagram account. Like, things just disappeared everywhere. Like, we lost so much stuff. It was just crazy, the censorship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that a lot of people were talking about, and we kind of experienced it. And it became kind of a fun game, but it's when you're actually trying to like keep an organization going. It's, I don't know how many people I've seen that had like, version 12 of their Instagram that got deleted, and then, completely banned off of Facebook and doing fake accounts on YouTube, or not fake accounts, but new emails to get onto YouTube and relaunch it. It was full on just corporate censorship. And I think that woke a lot of people up too, because it's just, I don't know, it's just everything they put in those movies. It's like, there you go, like, it's right here. They're,
Well, it was like the modern day version of the burning of the books, wasn't it? Like, where you couldn't say certain things because it would get taken down. And I think people started to see that. But I think it's funny because I know who you're referring to, because Owen Benjamin was one of those. He just all his accounts kept getting taken down. Yeah. And the AVN, like, very early on, because that's March 2020 was the first lockdown, I think. And I think it was these organizations and people and groups that were already on their radar, where they knew that, okay, well, if people start going there, we just got to shut them down now. But the thing is, and again, what was born out of that COVID era was so many of these like more freedom-based platforms. Like, you can't shut down the internet. So, short of that, like, information's always going to be on there. And we just found a way, you know what I mean? There was always a way. There's like, I think Rumble, was Rumble even around before then? If it was, it wasn't very well known.
I don't remember, but it came up during that point because everyone else was censoring.
We hadn't bothered with it till then, so I don't know how long it's been around, but Rumble became basically the only place we were for a while, because our Facebook page is still there, but they would just take everything down. Like, your videos would just be gone. So it was just a crazy time. But no, very early on, it was probably March 2020. That's when everyone, during the first lockdown, that's when everyone's saying, well, go and film the hospitals. Like, the hospitals are quiet. And that's what Meryl was going out and saying. Film the hospitals. We think this is a load of crap. And then very early on in the pandemic, I got Meryl onto David Crowe, who is a researcher calling out virology. And he had like the original papers and stuff saying how SARS-CoV had not been identified at all. And so we were one of the first out there saying virology is bogus.
Wow.
And it's very sad, because I think that was one of the last interviews David Crowe did, and then he suddenly passed away from cancer. So that was very sad, actually.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask that, because I wasn't sure, because I know that you're very well aware of the virology fraud. And now, knowing your science background, you probably could see straight through it.
How much of a shock was that for you when you first kind of were like, wait, virology itself is a sham?
I can tell you that I know how much cognitive dissonance hurts, because it physically hurt my head. Like, it was a physical pain in my head when I read a book by Janine Roberts called Fear of the Invisible, and that was in 2010. And that goes into great depth of the HIV hoax, like has all the receipts and goes through it. And she was all about polio just being pesticides, and how these doctors had testified in Congress that, look, this isn't a virus, this is poisoning, and we're curing it with vitamin C, and they just got ignored. So no, I grappled with that book. There's not many books that I just go back to every now and then and just reread another chapter. But I have with that book. Like, that book stunned me. That was my pivotal moment. I really grappled with that, but it's facts. Like, when you look into the actual foundational science and take the emotion out of it, it's just, it was mind-blowing. It was really, really tough. But I've just been so vocal on it ever since. And like Meryl didn't come around to it until COVID. Like, she didn't fully grasp it. I guess we didn't have to. Once COVID came around, where you more had to deal with this stuff, like, really, no, we can't let this go on anymore, because this will keep on going while ever this narrative stands. So, I mean, with the AVN, we put both narratives forward because, you know, there's people that are awake to it and there are people who are simply new to vaccines and just want some information. So, you know, we just put it all out there as a smorgasbord of information. But whenever I'm asked, I'll tell you, virology is absolute pseudoscience. And, so that was my journey. Yeah, Fear of the Invisible by Janine Roberts. If you can still manage to get a copy, that's an incredible book.
Fear of the Invisible. Yeah. And imagine we've talked about this a few times with guests, how the control systems use fear. We had a Navy SEAL on talking about that, how governments do that, cults do that. And it's just unreal. So they call, you know, like the anti-vaxxers, they have these names for us, you know, these whatever it is, the others, they're othering you. But it's so much more interesting when you actually just relax and put down the guard. Because I was trained as a medic in the Army, and I know all the whatever the mainstream stuff is. But what it actually is, or could be, because we don't really know exactly what all of it actually is. Like, what fundamentally, we can kind of describe it, what makes someone have a cold or flu. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it can spread through energy, it can spread through thought, which can be a little more scary. But I'm more interested in, like, that's just opening us up to, what are we really? What is this realm really? And it's obvious that there's a God, a creator, because this is way too magical, mystical to be just, two amoebas, you know, rubbed against each other in a pond, and then, you know, gorilla came out, and now we have me, you know, like.
I could tell you when I first questioned, like, the whole evolution thing, because one of our classes at uni was like evolution and all that stuff. And I remember this one class, because we were wondering, like, why whales, you know, are mammals, but they live in the ocean. Like, obviously they once were on land and now they're in the ocean. And he was explaining, there must have been an intermediate species that was like a wolf or something. I think he was saying like wolves that lived on the ocean, you know, like on the beach. And then slowly, you know, they've evolved from like 4 legs on the ocean to like being a whale. And I was like, that does not make any sense whatsoever. Like, I could not see how, like, the first offspring that came out that, like, didn't have legs and was now, like, in the ocean. Like, it just blew my mind. It blew my freaking mind so much. I was like, yeah, okay, that's just a step way too far. So, like, that was another moment where I'm like, ooh, that's what made these experts mean nothing to me, because I was like, that is some weird fairy tale stuff right there. Like, I just couldn't comprehend how that was even a thing.
Yeah, that's why I'm laughing. And Isaac and I often laugh at, like, scientific things where they've had to go so, like, the story's gotten so far-fetched because they have to try and make it fit their paradigm, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, it's laughable. A lot of it's actually really funny.
It is. And, like, over COVID, I mean, as much as it was angry and scary, it was so funny every day to see a new rule and a new thing. Like, it was just farcical. It was hilarious. And the things people were doing, you know, with the bags over their heads and masks in pools, and, like, it's just like, wow, this is actually amazing. Like, psychology is cool, that you can make otherwise intelligent people just become raving lunatics. It was stunning to watch.
Well said. That's exactly
it really
what happened.
was. Yeah.
I saw somewhere that China made Joe Biden, or, you know, the former president, made his staff do a COVID test, but they had to do the swabs in their rectum. And I was like, that is just demeaning and hilarious.
Yeah, but that's what. But see, it's all demeaning. Yeah, that was the thing. It is demeaning. Like, because
how far will they go? Well,
well, you saw the politicians at those conferences where they wouldn't be wearing a mask, and then they'd come out and be in a mask, and then they'd go back and take their mask off. Like, it was a ritual. It was humiliation ritual. It all was.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, like, you know, you mentioned, like, governments do it and cults do it. It's like, there's so many cultic tactics that are used on a like a very broad, like, on a collective scale, that people just don't see it. It's kind of frustrating because it's so, like, it's one of those things, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it's so obvious. Like, to us, people like us, it was so obvious because they were these humiliation rituals, which is like, even what do you guys have, the fraternities and the sororities, like, even they do that. It's like this culty, you've got to, like, that's what was. It was like on this grand scale. And then there's the, if you don't believe in what everyone else believes in, then you're excommunicated. And that's what's happened to people like us. And it's like all these things that they do in cults that's so clear when you're looking at a small little cult and how they operate, but people just can't see how it's happening on a larger scale. It's wild.
Yeah. And it wasn't even hard. That's what scared me, is how easy it is to make people that stupid. It was just everyday fear and everyday on message. And Topher Field explained this, that I went, oh, that's why they did it. Every day at 10, you know how they would have their announcements where they would go on with the rules for the day. And you know how it's often there'd just be one stupid change or one little tweak to a rule. Like today, hairdressers could be open, or tomorrow they can't, something like that. He said the purpose of that was to make people tune in every day. It was just to make them tune in, because if it had just been, oh, this is how many cases today, people wouldn't have cared. But because those rule changes a little bit every day, he said, and that was like their daily ritual. That was like the religion. Wow. That was like the going to the church part of it every day. And you know, you'd get your fear and you'd get your rules, and it was so easy. That's what really scared me, is people are so much more programmable than they think they are. As soon as you add that little bit of fear, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this reminds me, I don't know if do you ever read, like, you said you like books. Do you like C.S. Lewis?
I have never read C.S. Lewis. It's one of those things that's on my bookshelf to be read.
He's got
a long list.
He's got these little known sci-fi, it's a sci-fi trilogy. And I think it's the last book in that trilogy. But it's basically, he's describing in there, and pretty much says it exactly. This is written like, what is it? I can't remember, was he 1800s or early 1900s? But he was describing how the universities work and how easy it is to manipulate the smartest people. All you have to do is they, in that book, they took all the smart people magazines, the ones that, the scientific journals and all that. He's like, you put anything in here, they'll believe it because they think they're smart. You put anything in a newspaper and hand it to Joe Blow on the street, he'll be instantly skeptical of it. The average person, the quote unquote uneducated, is much harder to control and brainwash than the most educated, because if you tell them this is what smart people believe, they'll believe it.
And you saw that with COVID. It was the tradies, it was the working people who said, this is stupid, mate. Like, I put a mask on to go into a restaurant and then I can take it off and sit down and eat, and the curfew is 9 o'clock at night, like the virus knows the time of day. Like, it was all the common sense working people that were actually pushing back. It was. And it was all the elite class who were, oh my gosh, listen to the experts. Like, Fauci's just wonderful. It was just, and it was just apparent. But see, if you want to get into the school system, that's what it does. It rewards those who comply and do well in the system. And they're actually just as bad off as the people who are told they're stupid and no good at anything. The other thing school does is those people that are smart, it tells them they're smart, but it makes their confidence come from outside. It's like an external locus. Like, you're smart because we tell you you're smart. So you better believe what smart people are saying if you still want to be a smart person. Not internally going, I think something's wrong here. It's just all that external locus, and that's what school does. It's we tell you when you're smart, we tell you when you're good. So be good.
Absolutely.
If you want to be smart.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they don't teach kids, like, because that's funny. That's what I was going to say, actually. Like, with what we saw during COVID, like, people have been primed pretty much their whole lives to just accept whatever narrative they're given. And, they're just like, oh, well, this is happening now. And there's no critical thought, because that's not what is taught in schools. It's rote learning. It's do as I say. And there's very little room for actually allowing children to question things and go, oh, well, this is what I think of this. That's not how the schooling system's set up at all.
Yeah, those kids are always the worst kids. If you think back to your schooling, I know I do. All those boys that were considered the troublemakers, they were smart boys. They had common sense. Yeah. They weren't stupid. They just internally knew what we all knew. Something was very wrong with that system, and they just weren't complying. Yeah. They couldn't have said why it was wrong, but internally they knew. They had their internal compass working. And, I look back in shame. I was the straight A student, sat at the top of the class, had to be queen of everything because I had no self-esteem as a child. That's a whole nother story. But, it was my external thing. Like the more awards I got and the more, I'm a good person because look at all my awards, and I'm smart because look, school says so. Like it's that's what you've got to unpack. That's what you've got to unpack. And that's what's really hard. But no, school it's just so insidious, that expert class thing and I think a lot of people at school, especially if they're not, don't go on to be educated, they think back to science or whatever and think, oh, well, I sucked at science. I can't understand science. But those smart kids in school, they did well at science. So I'm going to listen to them because they obviously know. I think school confuses people on so many levels. They don't trust their own ability to research anything. They just trust the ones above, because at school they were made to feel stupid about it all.
Absolutely.
So they don't even bother. They make no attempt anymore. So that's why they're so at risk of these elite classes telling them you don't know. Because remember, at school you were dumb. Like who are you to question the guy at the top of your class that's now a doctor? Like, who are you idiot? And people really internalize that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. So I'm curious, Aneeta, so did you send your kids to school at all?
Not at all, no. Early on, I knew I couldn't send my kids to school. I just, especially my oldest, she was such a people-pleasing, pleasant child, as older children are. My second child woke me up to a lot more, but my oldest child was just such... I just saw her being just a little mess at school. I just saw her being so people-pleasing and nervous and stressed. I just saw... And I physically could not have dropped her off at a school gate and said bye. I physically could not have done that. So I started looking into homeschooling. At the time, the AVN actually put out a magazine called Living Wisdom, which just covered all sorts of things: health, nutrition, schooling. And in there was actually an article on unschooling. And like most people, when you first hear about unschooling, you go, sure. Especially me, because I was such a good student at school. I was so smart, what's this unschooling? So it talked about all these books by John Taylor Gatto and John Holt. And I just tucked that away a little bit and thought, that actually sounds really cool. I just don't think I'm brave enough to do it, because unschooling basically is, well, they call it child-led learning, natural learning. There's also radical unschooling. There's a whole bit. But basically it's children learning the things they want to learn, how they want to learn them. And you're basically a facilitator. You're not the top-down teacher. I mean, there are some things I've taught my kids, that I know. But, I mean, your kids will outdo your own knowledge very quickly. It's very humbling, unschooling, because you realise how stupid you are and how much your brain does not work.
Right.
So it's basically letting kids follow their passion. That people always think, oh, but kids they won't be bothered if you don't make them. No, that's because school ruins kids. If you see a toddler learning to walk, there's nothing more determined. If you just leave that toddler alone, they keep that determination. They love learning. It's only school and the boredom and just because it's like prison. It just ruins. It just takes all their thinking out of them. It's just awful what happens to kids in school. Yeah. So I actually homeschooled my daughter for her grade 1. There was actually a private distance ed school, Riverside in Maryborough. It's a Christian school. Not that we're Christians, but it was seen like a good program. And so, but she'd just do all these workbooks, and she'd get all the answers right. But next week she would remember the answers, because they weren't relevant or meaningful to her. So it was basically ticking the boxes, but what for? And my second child, who was only 11 months younger than the first one, she would look at the preschool program in this school and just be like, no, not doing it. Going outside play. See you later. And I couldn't, and I wasn't, because I kind of agreed with her. I was like, I see her point. I wasn't going to, you're supposed to make children do what they're told. I was just like, no, I agree. Run around outside playing with the dog is probably a much more fun idea. So that's when I really read, I read Grace Llewellyn's book called The Teenage Liberation Handbook, which was written in the late 80s by a school teacher saying, it was written to teenagers to say, quit school and do what you want to do. It's much better off. And,
damn, I should have given my mum that book when I was in high school and I wanted to leave and said, read this. It's just funny because I was super academic at school, super smart, I can very much relate to your experience. And I hated school. I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated being in four walls, being told what to do all day. I couldn't stand it.
I just hated the stress because I was a very high stress person.
Me
at the
too.
start of a term, you'd go, now I've got to get all those A's again. And see, I never thought all the things I was going to learn. I just wanted the A's. Like the content was not on my radar at all. It teaches you to value the wrong things. You know, it teaches through a value like what you're told, like the result, like not the actual learning. Yeah. Well, that's what for me. Yeah. I just want the pat on the head and say you're a good little girl. You're a smart little girl. Yeah. Yeah. So I read John Holtz had books he wrote in the 60s and 70s because he was an ex-school teacher. It's all ex-school teachers that tell you don't send your kids to school. Yeah. And he wrote How Children Fail and How Children Learn. And John Gatto wrote books called like Weapons of Mass Instruction and Dumbing Us Down. And I just read them. Yeah, I just read them and I'm like, everything clicked. Everything they said, I went, yep, that is so true. That is what school does. That's what the government, like, it was just all so clear. And I'm like, okay, sweetheart, to my husband, we're unschooling. And I said, if you're going to disagree with me, you're going to have to read this pile of books and tell me why you disagree with me. And he just said, sure, we're unschooling.
Love it.
So, but I mean, it is scary. And I tell you, when I first started, because I was always a crazy anti-vaxxer as well, like in my local community, I've been a pariah for a very, very long time. But I tell you, since COVID and since my kids have grown up, no one says anything to me anymore because they all know now that vaccines might actually be a bit dangerous and my kids are amazing. So, you know.
Yeah. How old are your kids now?
20, 19, 17, and 13.
Yeah. And what's the, if you want to share, what's the older one do? Like, is there a particular field or career or something that they got into?
Okay. Well, I should have mentioned the patch in the beginning. 5 years ago, I fell off a horse and got injured and got nerve damage in this eye, which is why I wear a patch now. For all those who are wondering, I'm not Illuminati. Those checks have not arrived yet.
Okay.
So my kids all witnessed that when I fell off the horse and I got knocked out. So I was, unconscious for a few minutes, and that really scared the heck out of them. And after that, my oldest daughter actually found religion. Like, she was on Instagram and started following all these young people who are really into Bible study, and because I guess it made her question her, humanity and all the rest of it. So she got so into it, and she'd never done an exam in her life or anything like that. She just started reading Bibles and doing Bible courses and doing all this stuff. And then when she turned 18, because she was connected to a lot of groups in like San Francisco who were running Bible courses, she got herself a passport and got herself to San Francisco, and she's been there ever since, and she's teaching Bible study in San Francisco.
Wow. Oh, okay. Good on her.
Right on.
That's amazing.
But just having the confidence to go and do that and to follow what you know is right for you. That is something that, a lot of people are trying to catch up to later on in life in their 40s or 50s. So it's good that she's starting there.
Yeah, and she's like, Mum, I'm giving these years to God. And, I've had different thoughts about, I'm not religious in the spec, they didn't grow up, heavy-duty Christians or anything. It just shows you what kids will be interested in if just left to their own thing. Like, that's what she loves to do. And, she does public speaking and she organizes things, and she just, it's just crazy, all the things she does.
That's amazing. That's why I think it's so amazing, because I know you and you're not super religious, but I love that you just also have that trust, and you see that in these kids that are raised in this different way and that don't go through the schooling system. They just left to their own devices. One, they can be fully trusted because they know themselves first and foremost, and they trust themselves. So you can trust them with, whatever it is that they want to go and do. And even if, and that's the thing, let her go and have this adventure. It doesn't mean she's going to be doing that for the rest of her life. She could change at any point, or she could love it and go deep. You can just let them go and run free, and it's just a whole different experience.
Well, and they're living their life, who am I to say what her life is like? I feel like she's chosen that path and she's loving it. So, what more can you want for someone? She could be here working in a dead-end job that she hates. That's just what most people do. So, she's loving it. And my other daughter, Kirsten, she's 19. When she was 17, she went and worked for a vet in North Queensland for a year and a half, but she's come home this year to work on the property. My son's 17, and he's just amazing. He's just been like a man since he was in his, early teens. He does all posts and builds the gates and does all the cementing and new fences and drives the dozer and all the heavy machinery. Like he could just walk into a very well-paying job just now, like become a contractor. Like, that's what he loves. Like he would have been so eaten up by school because when he was young, like he was like little for his age and he wore glasses and he had allergies, so he would have been so bullied at school. But because he's just grown up without any of that peer pressure, he's amazing and he's confident. And that's the main thing I can get across with unschooling. There's no peer pressure. Like these kids just don't care. They don't care what other people are doing. They don't care what people think of them. It's not on their radar. Like they like what they like. They do what they want. They do what they're interested in. They talk to adults. Like, because that's what just always blowing people away ever since they were little kids. Like adults will come, these kids just talk to them because they're just people. They have no concept of the adult being like the authority figure that they must bow down to. They're just people. Like if you're respectful, you'll be respected. Like it's just so bonkers what school does socially to kids.
Oh yeah.
And that's what they always say. Cause my daughter, she's grown, she's 21, but she was homeschooled most of her, after about 6th grade, she did homeschooling, and that she just taught herself. It wasn't like I was doing it or her grandma was helping out, but she just graded her own papers and everything was just like, yep. And people were always like the teachers typically would ask, like if I met somebody, we're talking, they're like, well, how do they socialize? And to me, now that I know, I'm like, well, they're not socialists. So that's one. Like, no, we don't need the school system in America to socialize our kids. But she went to Taekwondo and she just, whatever she was interested in, she just did that. But she was also good at just, talking to adults and just learning to be confident and doing what lights her up. And she's doing artwork and stuff now. So, but a lot of people do ask that question, or they might be afraid to do unschooling. And if they are, that's fine. But how do you keep them connected to a community and to learn from others and like have peers and friends that like in a natural way, not a school way?
Well, we're lucky. We only live 10 kilometres from a little town. So we're in the suburbs, really, even though on a beef cattle property. So my girls, they did Highland dancing. They did ballet when they were younger. The girls did netball. We played cricket. But they just, like if we go to other properties, they'd see other kids that they probably have missed out. My kids probably have missed out on like that close friendship with other kids in the sense that we're long ways from other homeschooling communities. Like on the coast and that where there's big homeschool co-ops, they probably have bigger friend groups than my kids have, because my kids just don't relate to kids though. Like here's the other thing. Like I know people think, oh, they've got to be mates with kids their own age. Well, no, they want to be mates with people who are kind of on their level. And like honest, a lot of times my kids would go places and they go, Mum, kids are just stupid. Like they just run around and scream and they're just stupid. Like they couldn't they couldn't relate to them. They couldn't. Yeah. And I know what they meant. Like they've often related better to elderly people. Like my kids, my mother-in-law used to volunteer at the local information centre, and that's, where all the tourists come in and that sort of thing. So my 2 oldest girls, they used to go there with her on her volunteer days, and they'd talk to the tourists and they'd, sell things like, they'd serve people the FPOS and when they were kids. And the older ladies that were there, they just loved them. And when the volunteers all went on tour days, the girls got to go. So they were great mates with 60, 70-year-old women. Loved them.
Love it.
So I don't know. People are so intent that if they're not in your 12-month age bracket, it's not friendship. Like I don't know. My friends are all over the shop. So, it's just, it's the quality of the relationship, I think, and what they're getting out of it. And I mean, I think people are worried, will they be decent human beings? School kids tend to not be good human beings. Have you seen the bullying and all the horrendous stuff that happens now? Like it's just, I mean, I was at school. It's horrendous. It is horrendous. And now social media, it is so much worse. Because, I mean, my favorite quote from John Holt, who was the school teacher, his quote was, if the social reasons alone are the only reason you don't send your kids to school, that would be enough. Meaning he thought the social aspect at school was so bad, even if the academics were great, don't send them. And he actually said, even if you keep your kid home from school and do absolutely nothing with them, they will still be better off than if they went to school. Meaning if you were even an unengaged parent and just left them to their own devices to learn what they want to learn, they would still be streets ahead than if they went to school.
Yeah. Because how many people that were made massive, massive success that were completely left alone, like neglected, like rough childhood, but because they just were like free to do and whatever they wanted to get into, they just became great at something.
Look at a lot of entrepreneurs, and not always, but quite often they're like high school dropouts, or they didn't finish school because they didn't fit the mold, and they went on to invent things and create things and build businesses that earning multi-millions. It doesn't matter. Like, that was one of the things, and I think that's a big thing too. I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Australia it's like, well, you've got to finish year 12 and you've got to get your school certificate or whatever they call it now, because you've got to get a good job, or if you want to go to uni. And it's like, I didn't finish school. Like, I was, again, super academic. I wanted to leave from like after year 10, I wanted to leave, or maybe that's the school certificate. I don't know what all the papers are called now, but mum kept saying, because I was so smart, she was like, no, you've got to finish and you'll do really well and whatever. But like, I had no intention of going to uni. I didn't know what I wanted to study if I did that. And so I ended up finishing year 11. I did one term of year 12 and then I dropped out. I ended up going and doing a Bachelor of Health Science at 25 when I figured out what I actually wanted to do. And the years of work experience I got before that, like, helped me way more. I find, like, even now that we're building our own businesses, that helped me way more than my bloody degree that cost me, I got in a ton of debt for. And it's just like, this whole system is just always set up to like have you behind in some way.
Yeah, and I mean, it puts kids on a path before they even know what they want. Like, I always tell kids now, other school kids, at least have a gap year. At least have a gap year. If you're going to go to uni, you better know that is really what you want to do. It's not just, I'm the smart kid, so I've got to do medicine or something. Like, a lot of them are on that track. I'm the smart person, so I've got to do this. Have a year off. Think about what you want. Get some real life experience. And I mean, that's the thing. Because we're like, oh, well, how do you go to uni? Universities want customers, people. They do. And there are so many tracks to get in. If you get to 30 and decide you want to do a course, there's ways to get in. Like, it's exactly. Not this thing. Rush yourself down that pathway thing. Like, I always say, people, unless you're choosing a career that absolutely has to have a university degree, find another way around it. Because there'll be a cheaper, probably more educational way to do it. Like, unless you want to be a doctor or something like that, there's other ways to get where you want to go. Get real experience and do real things. And that's the thing that school robs kids of, is doing real things for real reasons and having responsibility. Kids are so babied now. That's what I always tell, like, with unschooling, give your kids as much responsibility as you can, basically. Like, even if it's having a family pet and they're the one responsible for it, making kids have real jobs, that is what gives you confidence. Doing real things for real reasons, that is what gives kids confidence. And people say, oh, well, there's risk and stuff. Yeah, well, you learn about risk management by actually taking risks. And I don't mean do stupid things with kids, but, give them real things to do that involve real risk and them actually having to be responsible. And they do amazing things. Like, my kids, they've been riding horses since they were young and stuff. They've all had their own working dogs, their choice, but they've always had to be responsible for them. And that is just so grounding. But I mean, people do unschool in the middle of apartments in New York City too. Like, it's not just, a rural lifestyle does have a lot of advantages, but, people do it everywhere. Like, there are things you can do and find to do with kids everywhere. Like, it's a massive movement worldwide now. It's just, and COVID has just made it even bigger. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for a bit of contrast so I went to move from Wyoming to Texas, and Texas has a pretty miserable, like, school system. It's pretty low ball, like very low hanging fruit. But I homeschooled from age 14 to 15, I think, just 1 year, maybe 1.5. During that time homeschooling, I think I was only doing school until about from like 8 to maybe 11 or 12 for like 3 or 4 hours. And in that 1.5 years, when I went back to school, I tested to get back into high school, and I was going in at year 9. I was going in at year 9 and was testing at 11th and 12th grade level after just 1 year of half a day of just looking at a workbook and answering questions. So that, if you take that and put that on a national level, you can imagine how far these kids could be if they were let to do what they were going to do, what they're interested in, what they naturally have gifts for, and go full passion into that. Like, we'd be building cathedrals again in like a couple of years probably.
Which is why they don't want it. They don't want it. And you imagine how efficient it could be. School is so efficient, inefficient. Like it takes all those hours in your day. It's probably actually an hour and a half of actual work if you sat down and did it, which is why homeschoolers just breeze through. And I mean, if you've heard of the Sudbury Valley School, that was like an unschooling school in America. It's children-led, and a group of children.
Melissa Gray mentioned that one.
Yeah, they actually said, hey, we actually want to learn maths. So he got these kids to sit down. I think they did an hour a week of something for 6 weeks, and they went through like the whole high school maths course in 6 weeks, and they were all proficient. Or there might be the primary one. I can't remember the education. But basically it just showed you that when kids are willing and want to learn, school just wastes so much time. And that's what Grace Llewellyn said in that Quit School book. She was like, you could do the meat and bones of most of these school courses in, a week course, just a week intensive, you'd be done with the subject. Like, it's just crazy. But, I mean, it's true. It's childcare. School is childcare. That's all it is. It's indoctrination and childcare. That's all it is. And it's just designed, as Gatto said, it's just designed to make you obedient and stupid. That's all it's for. And people have a hard time hearing that, but that is all it's for.
Well, and we're seeing that now, like even in the States, I think there was like I don't know if it was like a documentary or like just this video came out where they went to like like elementary school, and they asked like first graders, second graders, however old they were, like what their favorite food is, and then they were all like hamburgers, hot dogs, and then like they had to name fruits and vegetables and they couldn't name them. And it's like, if that's what is like, if that's the product of kids going to school, then there's something fundamentally wrong. And then you look at like the state of the health of the American population and the health system. It's like, well, that's you can see how they're funneling people through to become sick, fat, and unhealthy.
Yeah, and they just dumb the standards down too. Like what was considered like primary school maths and stuff in the late 1800s in the US would be at least university level now. Like it's just crazy the way the standards have just dropped and dropped. And I even look at university courses now, and it's all got remedial maths at the start and English, like because they know kids come out of school not knowing anything. Basically, it's just and atrocious.
That applies to even the higher stuff, like doctors and even lawyers. But so we did, and so we in my medical training in the Army, we had what's called medical fundamentals. It was 6 weeks. In that 6 weeks, one of the doctors that ran the training environment we were in said that they condensed 2 years of pre-med school, the first 2 years of medical school. They took that and condensed it into 6 weeks. And it was brutal. Like, it was hard. But in 6 weeks, we cleared through 2 years of doctor training, like pre-doctor training, all the anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, all that stuff. We were working on cadavers within like the first week. And if that's possible at that level, like that's some really technical stuff. I mean, it's just, I can't wait for the Unschooled to start designing actual, like really kick-ass training programs for whatever, for engineering, for math, for science, for different things to develop, new energy. I can't wait for these kids to develop some more free energy ideas and stuff. And like,
and I just want to say too, but like, that's the biggest part of that is the kids being interested in what they're learning, because that was one of the things I also hated about school, especially high school. Like the first couple of years, like you have to do all the subjects. I hated history. I hated science at school. And the irony of that is I ended up going on to do a whole, Bachelor of Health Science, or advanced diploma, whatever I ended up getting. But, I think that's the biggest thing is like the kids need to be interested in, because whatever they're interested in, they will just naturally like follow that. And like I said from the time that I left school, I will never, ever send my kids to school ever. I was always adamant about that because it's a one size fits all model. And that's not how we operate as human beings. We are all individual. We are all unique. And you can't just put everyone into a school and expect them to thrive. And I always give the example of my brother and I. So I'm super academic, was super smart. He had dyslexia. And it was really hard for him to read or write. And he was very similar to your kids, Aneeta, where we grew up. We were semi-rural where we grew up. And he was our neighbor across the road was he used to run hay bales, and, you know, they didn't have cattle, but they had horses. And so they were rural country. And he just always had a job for my brother. My brother was driving forklifts by 12 years old. You know, and I always use that example. He was dyslexic, really struggled with school. I don't even think he finished school either. He went on to become a tradie and has always made way more money than me. Like, if you want to look at, like, you know, actual life skills, like, what's more beneficial? Like you said, unless you want to go on and actually become a doctor or a lawyer or something where you need to go through, you know, these academic institutions. Other than that, it's just, for the majority of people, it's not the right fit.
Yeah, and even with like the doctors and lawyers and stuff, that's just because the current system says you have to have that degree. Like
Exactly.
Years ago, it used to be like an apprenticeship system. Like if you wanted to be a doctor or lawyer, you apprenticed to one. You just learnt it. You know, I don't think surgeons, as much as we venerate surgeons and stuff, if people were just allowed to go and learn with them, you know, a lot of people could be surgeons and stuff. It's just such an elite thing to how to get into, you know, and they love their high income, because if they just let anyone who wanted to do it learn to do it. Because John Taylor Gatto tells some wonderful stories about that, about a con man who conned his way onto, I think, a Navy ship, and he was like the medic or something. And he was supposed to be the medic, and this guy got appendicitis, and he was expected to deal with it. So he just had a textbook there on how to do an operation to get an appendix out, and he did it just with an instruction book. So, you know, it just shows you this expertise stuff isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's just so elite, and it's to keep the top at the top and the bottom at the bottom. Because, if we all just had easy access to learning any of those trades, you know, it would crumble a lot of the, you know, the classes in society. That's why they can't do that, you know. And a lot of the kids who do worse out of the school are the more poverty ridden kids, because, you know, they have the situation they have at home, and then they get to school and they're usually acting out, and then they get told they're stupid and they think they're stupid and they end up in crime. Like, it's just a horrible cycle. Whereas if those kids just had resources and support, they would do amazing things, a lot of them. So it's just really sad. Every time we used to drive past the school, my kids would look like, oh, look at all the little prisoners. Like, it's so sad. It's just sad.
That's how I felt.
It does. The cages. Like,
that's honestly how I used to feel at school, Aneeta. It's like you say that, but I'm like, I actually felt that. I always felt like I was in these four walls that I couldn't leave. Like, I was just told what to do all day. Like, just, it never sat well with me. Like I on such a deep level. And interesting, like what you said earlier too about like the social aspect. And this is actually, we just had a friend over yesterday, and she was chatting about someone that was super smart. And she was like, yeah, they moved him forward like 2 years in school. And I was like, well, I was super smart at school and they repeated me. So their logic was that because, this was in year 2, I think, and Mum got called in because I used to love to read. I was reading chapter books by grade 1, and I would just sit and read at lunchtime because I loved reading. And so they called Mum in and said, oh, look, she's not really developing socially. Now, mind you, I had friends, and kids would come and ask me, oh, do you want to come and play with us? And I'd say, no, thank you. I'm just happy to read, because that was just me as a kid. I was always happy to just do my own thing. And they said I wasn't developing socially. They IQ tested me. I was in the gifted and talented range, and they recommended that Mum repeat me because of the social aspect, which still makes no sense.
Tell you in class, you're not here to be social. You know, sit down and shut up.
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense.
That's so dumb.
And then
I want to use the word retarded. Like, that's literally the term. It's like slowing you down, but it's like, the mentally challenged are the ones running the school. And
then I went on that was at one school, and then I changed schools. And then in the later years of primary school, I also got bullied. It wasn't it was more, it was within my friend group. So it was like some days we'd be friends, some days they'd just completely ostracize me, and there was just no rhyme or reason to it. And that was actually very traumatic for me. Like, I look back now, and a lot of my really deep, like my core wounds, all the inner healing I do, a lot of it seems to come back to that. And I also think that is part of that. You know, you often see, and this is why I hate like a lot of the movies and TV shows we watch, and how high school, and you always hear this, oh, high school's such a horrible place. Yeah, high school's a horrible place for kids. And it's like, why are we perpetuating that I think it's done on purpose. I think it's done because it is this, all of these systems of control are to keep us in a state of trauma so that we're in a state of fear, because then we're more easily controlled. That's really what it comes down to. And I think the schooling system's part of that. It's like kids go through and they're severely bullied. And like you said, with social media now, it's so much worse because they go home and they can't escape it. And it's just fundamentally wrong on so many levels.
Well, and people go, oh, well, you just got to suck it up and get through it. No, you don't. No. And in one other facet of life, once you get out of school, like if you have relentless bullying in the workplace, there's laws against that. Like, you know, but when our kids are kids and impressionable and really vulnerable, we're like, oh, yeah, you can just suck up all this abuse. Like, it'll do you some good. Like, it's what, no, like we need, that's why so many kids don't have boundaries and are so anxious and have, and people always say to me, oh, I could never homeschool. I couldn't put up with my kids. I'm like, yeah, well, you can't put up with your kids because they come home from school and they're angry and they're tired and they're resentful. Like you would have different kids if you didn't force them through school. Like I have a great relationship with my kids, but my kids always tell me, they say, Mum, parents don't seem to like their kids. Like they don't. Like they don't seem to genuinely like their kids, because my daughter worked for a vet and she helped look after the kids, and she said they just don't like the kids. I don't know. It's weird. You know, it's just, it's this, I don't know. I don't know. Like my kids are my whole world. I'm sure like people mean well for their kids, but they just want to be their kids over there. And I was to say another thing John Gatto said is what we don't give kids enough of now is actually alone time. Like we're all about activities and social and people. What kids really lack is just quiet time alone to think and to be. Like if you can't be alone with yourself as a person, you're very vulnerable. And he said that's what school really ruins for kids too, is their inability to just be on their own with their own thoughts, you know, just getting to know themselves essentially. So, you know, that's what school is. It's always lots of people and lots of things and all the activities, because kids just don't have no alone time to actually just sit and ponder and think. Like that's another big thing of school.
Yeah. And look at, in my case, when I was alone and very happy to be alone reading and whatever, I was told that something was wrong with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. They pathologize it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's just insane, isn't it? Like it's, and that, I laugh at the whole, because, you know, all the years that I was like, I'm never going to send my kids to school. And that's always the number one thing. Yeah. Well, how will they socialize? And it's like, they'll do sport. They'll do whatever it is they're interested in. They'll meet other kids. Like we're going to leave. And I mean, the beauty. Yeah, go ahead.
Parents are people. Parents are people. Like, you know, you learn to interact with people, like, and you can just transfer those people skills to other people. Like, it's just, I don't see the drama. Like, I really don't. Because when we would go to like functions with the schools and stuff, my kids could stand in line fine, far better than the school kids could. Because when kids have so much freedom and they learn cues and responsibility, when you do ask them for something, they're pretty good at complying, because they know a lot of the other time they have full autonomy and choice. So when you do say, hey, I actually really need you to behave this way at this moment, they're pretty good at saying, okay, I get it. I understand the context of this and I'm going to do it, because they've got that autonomy most of the time. You know, it's these kids that never have autonomy at all, that just act out and hate everything and hate people, and you can't blame them. I mean, I did well at school, but I hated school too. Like, so I just viscerally hated it. I hated the stress. I hated being told what to do. I hated the boredom because I was smart. I used to finish my work really early.
Same.
And then you would just sit there bored out of your brain. And I was at boarding school, so every night we had to sit for hours and do prep, and you had to sit there quietly. And here's the real crime. We weren't even allowed to read. Like, if you'd finished your homework, you were not allowed to read. If they caught you with the book, they would confiscate it. Yeah.
I think how ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's more about behavior modification. Yeah,
absolutely.
So one of the questions that popped into my head was like, what if someone has a child, let's say a boy that's very energetic and hard to like, you know, keep track of? I know a lot of women, you know, I don't know, I've met some people that had boys that were like that, and they were like super happy to let them go to school and just go and let them deal with it. But it's like, okay, one, that's an attitude that needs to change, but how do they actually structure something for a high energy child that needs more interaction and more things to do? How do you do that at home unschooling?
Well, it depends where you are. I mean, we are fine. Like my son, he could just be out on his push bike all morning if he wanted to. He could be, you know, out. They'd be out taking photos. They'd be out on their little four-wheelers and they'd take photos of things and like, look, Mum, look at this video of what we did. And I'd be like, you shouldn't be showing Mummy that. But no, like because we're on the farm, like my son would often be out with my husband working, just doing stuff. You know, they ride horses, they have dogs, like they would just go running with their dogs. So from my point of view, that was easy, like having a boy. And he was never a reader or a writer. Like he learnt to read because he wanted to learn instruction manuals for mechanicking. That's how he learnt to read, because that's what he wanted to learn. Like he is an amazing mechanic now. He's learned it all through YouTube and books. But his brain works that way, because when he was 4, he was doing Lego Technic kits. You know, those massive big Lego Technic kits. He started doing those when he was 4, and he would sit for hours. One day he sat for 4 hours as a 4-year-old and just had this little kit, and he took it apart and put it back together, and took it apart, put it back together. Like just yeah, because people say, kids can't concentrate. I'm like, well, yeah, when they're interested, they actually can. They actually can do amazing things. It's amazing when you unschool kids, you realize how programmed you are. Like the hardest part of unschooling is deschooling your own brain. Your kids will be fine. Your kids will be fine. And I always say to people, do less and don't stress. Like at the start, I was like, oh my God, they've got to read and they've got to do maths. And they're going, no, just chill out. Leave them alone. Because plenty of school kids these days cannot read or do basic maths. Yet my kids, they can do maths in their heads that takes me a long time, and they can just do it because they're not scared of it. What school does is makes you hate it and be fearful of things. That actually just makes sense. Like maths just makes sense. So when kids come to maths, which is just everyday life, really, with just an open curiosity and, hey, I need to work this out, they work it out, because you're not there testing them and you're not there scaring them, or you're not there belittling them. If you just leave them alone in a calm manner, they just learn amazing things. Because like my older kids, I was there, teaching them how to count and, doing maths games and all this stuff. And my youngest, I think I taught her to count to 20. I think I might have done that. And she's done all the rest on her own because I just chilled out. I just really chilled out.
That's awesome.
And I know it's hard for people, if you haven't done it, to explain what they look like. And I'm not patronizing, because people are like, well, how do you know what they know? I'm like, I don't know. You don't be patronizing. You don't say, hey, can you read this? Read this to me. You don't do that. You just witness them, and you know sort of where they're at with things. Maybe not exactly, but you can't be patronizing and intrusive, because how would you like if someone did that to you? Be like, hey, Alexa, do you know this thing? Where are you? Like, how smart are you, Alexa? Like that. Kids smell patronizing crap 1,000 miles away. They know when you're trying to be like that with them.
Yeah. So and even if you know the answer you're being asked, like the answer to the question you're being asked, if you're being asked in that way, you automatically you start questioning yourself, because it's like, oh my God, do I know the answer? And so it's and schools do that a little too, I feel.
Yes, a lot. Yeah. That's what they do. They're constantly prodding. Because that was in John Holt's book. One of the things that woke him up was he had this child in his class who was a failure at maths. Like Chris could not do maths. It was in primary school. And then John Holt went out bowling one night, and this kid who in school was a failure at maths was like the scorer for a professional bowling team and doing a great job. And that's when it dawned on him, like, oh, something's wrong here. Like in the real world with the real reason, this kid's amazing. And in my class, he can't do anything. Like it's just, So no, the main thing I would say, don't put fear in your kids, and don't prod your kids, because that will shut down their learning. That is what shuts down their learning. Like that oversight and that prodding and poking and, because they'll just, but they will call you on it. Like these kids will just call you on your stuff all the time. Yeah. I get called out for my stuff. So, and they're not
that would have been my biggest challenge.
Sorry, you go. Yep.
I'm just saying that's my challenge, is the prodding part, because I'm very like driven. I'm like, all right, now what's the mission? We always have a mission. We always have an objective, but that works for like the boy that needs tons of stuff to do and lots of energy, like maybe for certain personality types, but I'm a product of that same thing through education and through the military. So,
Yeah. And that's why I say to my kids, I'm jealous of them in a way, because I'll never know what it's like to really have my brain to myself. Like they do.
Yeah.
Like they do. Like I don't know I always say to them, I don't know what programs I've still got running, because they have no concept of school. Like one day we were at the skate park in town, and the school bell rang, and all my kids went, what's that? They had no concept of a school bell. And I went, oh, of course they don't. And when I explained to them what it was, they thought that was so stupid. They thought it was so stupid that you would ring a bell and then the children do something else, and then you ring a bell and they do something else. Like they think.
Well, then you show them Pavlov's dogs, and then it all makes sense. Exactly. The conditioning.
That's all it's for. Wow. Like, no, it's been incredible. Like I've chilled out on it a lot more over the years. Like I did. I was a lot more worried at the start, like most people are when they start unschooling, and then you just get through it and you go, wow. And the schools have just got so much worse now with all the trends and stuff. And it's just insane. Like, I don't know how you send your kid to school now. It's insane.
I know. On so many levels, but there's like that stuff being introduced to them really early. It's like the technologies even. Like, I remember, I think the year that I left school, or maybe like a couple of years after, was when they first introduced like every student's going to have a laptop, and they were starting to go more digital. And now you're seeing like these kids that even haven't started school, where they just have iPads shoved in front of them for half the day to keep them occupied. And now with that also being introduced, where they're using screens more at school, I think it's gotten so much worse. And then, you know, the prevalence now of like kids being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, which is an interesting one to bring up actually, because there's a lot of that has been linked to vaccine reactions and the effect on the nervous system and things like that. But then I think it's also this, again, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and these kids that should not be in school sitting in a classroom all day, that just have all this energy, are then getting diagnosed with ADD and ADHD because they're just in the wrong environment.
Yeah, it's a big, like there's vaccines, the school system itself is appalling. You know, all the toxins in food, kids are hopped up on sugar and food dyes. Like, it's just this terrible, like there is not one thing. Like, because, you know, people, vaccines do all this. Well, yeah, they do. But then, you know, there's all the other things. You can't really just pull one thread. It's just all, like society just has to do, you know, a whole like change around. It's just, and I think it is because you see so many teachers quitting now because they just can't cope, like with the amount of kids and the autism and like they can't have discipline at school, which, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's great the way the school system's imploding, actually. I think it's great that more kids are getting through it, because it couldn't happen soon enough. Like, it's just an awful, I mean, and that's the thing. If you want to make school better, you could make school better tomorrow. Just make it not compulsory. And schools would change overnight, because I'd have to. If a kid, you know, because schools do have a lot of resources. They do have a lot of wonderful people in teachers. You know, if you just made it not compulsory and kids got to go to school and use it as a resource centre, which is like a lot of what these Sudbury Valley unschooling schools are, that would be amazing things. That you could just change that tomorrow. Just, you know, and people go, oh, well, kids wouldn't go. I'm like, well, maybe you need to change the system then. If it's so bad they wouldn't go, change it so it's a place they want to go. There's your answer. Yeah. Like, if it's a place they want to go, they're actually going to be getting something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that idea. Just like a resource center. And then if you've got someone there that has expertise in different areas, or set up, you know, workshops, almost like it's a university, like, what's that famous, Oxford. Isn't Oxford kind of like that, where it's just, you show up and if you want to go to that guy's lecture, go to that guy's lecture. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it goes, but I've read a couple books from people that went to Oxford, and it sounds like that, where it's not really structured. You show up and you learn what you want to learn, and
you can
focus
courses
on something.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. But I mean, there's been unschooling schools. I think there's another one in England. The name escapes me now, but have been doing this for a long time. You know, it's not just an airy-fairy idea. I mean, you would have massive teething problems at the start, absolutely, because kids without all that control system would have no self-control. They wouldn't, because they have they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. It would be absolutely mental for a little while. It would. Yeah. But then it wouldn't. You know, once they got the trust, because I see some people when they start unschooling, they say, oh, we're just going to try unschooling. And I'm like, no, your kid's going to sit around for 2 months and do nothing, because they're going to have no faith whatsoever that you're just going to send them back to school. So they're just going to say, yeah, screw it, we're trying unschooling. Like, unschooling really means you de-school and you get that whole system out of your brain, because so many people start unschooling, then stop because it didn't work. Your kid has got to get the programming out of their brain for so long. Like, you know, if your kid's been in school several years, probably a whole year before your kid's even remotely going to start, you know, really engaging with what they love and learn. Like, the programming is that deep. Like John Taylor Gatto was saying, if you can get your kid not going to school until they're 12, they'll probably be okay, because those years are so vital. Like, if you can get your kid to 12 and not have them in the system, they're probably going to be all right, because most of that formative learning, you know, you don't have to undo it. Like, they're going to have their thinking skills intact. So, I don't know, because a lot of people go, oh, well, you know, but what about high school and that stuff? And I just think, wow, that's probably the most important place to not have your teenagers. Like, it's it's just crazy. Like when they're really forming who they are and really buttoning down on what they want to do. And, you know, high school is just an absolute quagmire. I think back to all the kids I went to boarding school with, and I know how many of them hated school passionately. And, you know, every day would be there whinging about how much we hated it. And now they all send their kids to school and think I'm the crazy person. I'm like, but I was there with you and you hated it. Like we all hated it. So I don't know. But it's the conditioning. It's weird.
Absolutely. I was going to say that it's just part of like, that's just the norm, you know, your kid starts kindy and then they go through and then they go to high school. And I think, and then like parents structure their lives around. And unfortunately, like it is just a reality now that, you know, that a lot of families, both parents do have to work with, especially with the cost of living, the way it's gone up in the last 5 years or so. But that's what I was going to say too. I think what often happens, and I've actually seen this with people just considering homeschooling, they go and start getting prepared and get all the books and get all the work that the kids are going to do. And then they get really overwhelmed because they're like, well, how am I going to do what a teacher does? You know, and how am I going to do? And it's like, but that's where they're going wrong, because they're trying to then make that same model fit within the home setting. And then I've also heard of people that started the homeschooling, then went to unschooling because they realized it was actually really difficult to do the homeschooling. And again, every child's going to be different. Like I know of families that homeschool and particularly I think the example I'm thinking of is with girls. They love they love the workbooks. They love doing it. So if it works, like by all means, but I think it really does have to be so individual to the child and the family and, you know, the family structure. And even for families that can't, you know, if they can't have a parent like stay at home and do that, just even looking into schools like, you know, Steiner schools and Montessori kind of has the same philosophy. I don't think Montessori is only like childcare though, isn't it? I don't think they do like schooling.
I think there's still Montessori schools. I'm not sure. I'd have to look
into
it.
There
were Montessori schools.
Yeah, but even those, just like even those types of schools that have a different way of teaching can be so much more beneficial. Because my brother went to a Steiner school for a few years in primary and loved it. Again, for a kid that was dyslexic and, you know, really hated reading and writing, he loved it because it's so hands-on and they're always out playing and, you know, play-based learning and doing things with his hands. So doing. It was like very much. And the boys, he had quite a lot of boys in his class and they just love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very child-centered. See, like it actually values the individual in all of that. That's where the school system is so big. If you're just a number and they don't care. They just don't care like what you're interested in, what you want to do today. That's just not their problem. And like when you do really well, it's because the school's wonderful. And when you do really bad, it's because you're a bad child, you know, because that's the thing. Like when I did really well at school, it's because of me. It wasn't anything that school did. It was because I was driven and I was doing all that stuff. But the school would take all the accolades. But the kids that were doing really terribly and were bad kids, well, they were just bad kids. You know, it wasn't the school.
Yeah.
School always takes credit
exactly.
for the good things and not bad. But John Holt always said, if you want to see the best part of school, just get the brochure. That's the best part of school. That's as good as school's ever going to be. Read the brochure, but don't send your kid. Just get the brochure. So, yeah, no, it's been crazy. But no, I recommend people read John Taylor Gatto's books, especially because it gets into the history of how we got the system we got. You know, and he was a award-winning teacher. He taught for 30 years in New York. He taught in some of the best schools and some of the povo schools. And he was all. It's just all the same, whether they're in the flash school or not. And he retired because he said he couldn't hurt children anymore. That's what he said school was. It was just hurting children. So, but it's funny though. Like when I started this journey with the kids, I guess 15 years ago, you know, we were the crazy fringe people. And now everyone's like, oh, wow, the school system's terrible. Like it's just, and now everyone's questioning vaccines. I said to my kids, you know, we're almost normies now. And they're like, Mum, you'll never be a normie.
I love that. Yeah. And like we know quite a lot of, we've met a lot of kids in the last few years that are being like homeschooled, unschooled, whatever, but they just don't go to school. And they are the most well-rounded human beings I think I've ever met. And the way that they can speak to adults. And it's funny, I've always been one of those people like, I don't know how to talk to kids, but I've realized that's what it is. They don't know how to talk to adults. But I remember when we met, a lot of these kids we met were through the Living Free movement, and they're so easy to talk to and so mature. Like I could never pick their ages. Like I knew they were teenagers, but I could never really pick their ages because they're just so mature and they look at you in the eye when they speak to you and so grown up and just the way it really excites me for the future. Like this is the next generation.
Yeah, well, they're the only healthy ones that are going to be left, I think, too. Like,
Yeah,
with
exactly.
the vaccination schedule going, like, you know, you do wonder sometimes what's ahead for these kids, but, you know, it's all those quotes, you know, they come through you, but belong not to you, you know, like this is their time. So this is their journey and what they came here to do, you know. I think the most amazing thing actually in the last 5 years has been learning about spelling to communicate, and that most of these severely autistic kids are actually brilliant, cognitively brilliant. They just can't move their bodies. That has been the miracle of the last 5 years. And now, I don't know if you've listened to the Telepathy Tapes podcast.
Yeah.
It has just blown me away. I'm like, oh, all this stuff that you'd felt was true for years. You're like, oh, well, that is true. You know, like thoughts are things. Like we all are in whatever that cosmic soup of thought is. We're actually all in it. So, you know, it really is like what you put out counts. You know, it really does. Like I have to remember that sometimes when I get really rageful and I see another vaccine injury story, another dead baby or something, I'm like, oh, you know, but you just got to be careful what you're putting out, and that you're not just receiving stuff and you're actually putting out the right stuff. So that's what I try to be mindful of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. And when I listened to the telepathy tapes, I was blown away too. I was just like, this is freaking phenomenal. And it really gave me so much hope. Like I had this moment listening to that where I was like, even like they do, you know, quote unquote, they do so much to try and keep us down. You know, the way they condition us, the way they poison us with vaccines and the food and the water and all these things. They do so much. And when you actually think about it, like they literally have to try and do everything to keep us down because that's how powerful we are. And what they're finding now with these autistic kids and these neurodivergent people that are communicating through thought and in this whole other metaphysical world, I'm like, even with the vaccines and what they've tried to do to injure people, it's backfired on them. Like, you know what I mean? Like we really are so powerful that it really doesn't matter what they do. We can overcome anything. And I think the more that people really step into that and believe it, because that's the first step, is the belief. A lot of people don't believe that we are that powerful. I think that's where we can really, really turn things around. And we're seeing that starting to happen, but the more people that can really step into that belief and that power, like there's just like we've already won. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just genuinely believing that. Like that's the thing, that if you have that genuine belief, that is what goes out. Like you know, you can say your mantras and you say, oh, I believe this to be true. But unless you feel, I know to explain, but you feel it's the truth.
Yeah.
That's what's powerful. Like you have to really embody that truth, and that's what changes things. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I can tell you, I did not see myself becoming a crazy anti-vaxxer outcast, one of the most hated people in Australia and all those things. Like it's been, you know, I've been hated on by the mainstream media and all the rest of it. Like it's just been insane when you think we're just trying to stick up for, you know, parents who have some of the most injured kids you'll ever see. And you just see so many horror stories. And that was the thing when we went on tour with that bus. We knew there was horror stories out there, but wow, just seeing them in your face hour after hour, day after day, it horrified us. So we were just devastated. It was just the most devastating. I don't think I've recovered from that yet. Like I don't know how I've still got to process. Like you just, I don't know, just that level of human suffering. And you know, it's just on an exponential scale out there. It's just, yeah, I'm getting pretty jaded, to be honest. It's, and since all the COVID jab injuries too, it's just like, can we all just wake up now and like end this? And like, I don't know what's the end of the rainbow, but I've always just thought you just do your bit and you know, the rest of it will just work out, because you can only do your bit, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Very grateful for that though, that people like you that have this pillar, the strength inside them to go and to be attacked, and then to also hold other people's stories and this trauma and this like pain, and know this, and have your head full of all this stuff and still be like, we're not stopping. We're going forward. We're going to make this count. All this time, all this pain is going to be worth something in the end. We may not see it in our lifetimes, but it means that much to keep going.
Yeah, well, I just can't not do it. I don't know how to explain that to people. But when I found all this out, I just couldn't be quiet. I couldn't look at a pregnant woman and not tell her. So I've always been disappointed in our community, to be honest, that a lot of people have been far too scared to speak out. And I'm just like, they're killing babies. How, anyway. But that's people. That's their own journey. But, yeah, I don't, I'm not a courageous person. I'm not a very brave person. I'm just a person who goes, they're killing babies. I'm going to tell people about it. So that's how you get here.
Yeah. Yeah. And people like you are so needed. And, you know, everything that Meryl did for the last 30 years and what she went through. Like, I don't know if we mentioned it on our episode with her, but like she's received death threats and massive media attacks on her publicly. And yeah, and that's the thing. It's like no one goes through that if they're telling a lie. Like no one would willingly put themselves through that for a lie. And it is so important that people like you guys and other people that are involved with the AVN and other organizations like this have been a voice for so many of the voiceless, you know, and for people to go, especially through COVID, like when people go through these experiences of vaccine injuries, whether it's with their children or themselves, they're gaslit by the medical profession. They're completely ignored. They're told that they're crazy. Like I've heard so many stories of where they've been recommended to go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist because they're told they're crazy for like saying what they've seen with their own eyes. Like it's insane. And so to have, you know, people like you and the AVN and the bus to actually hear these people's stories, like you see it, like watching some of those interviews, you can see for them how healing it can be as well. It's really sad that the stories of the ones that have lost their children, like lost their babies, but you can, like they pretty much all say the same thing. Like if I can tell my story and someone hears it and it helps one other person, then I've done something.
And that's the thing with our movement. None of us are ever going to vaccinate again. We don't do this for us. We do this for, you know, because we want other people to know about this. You know, it's just, we don't want you in our club. We don't want you to know what we know. We don't want you to know it. It's just so hard that you don't want them to join you. You kind of need them to join you. It's weird, you know. And like people like Polly Tommy, she said, you know, if it hadn't been her son who was terribly injured, she would have been the most pro-vax troll out there. Meryl was incredibly pro-vax before it was her son. And it's so hard that has to be how people learn. It is so hard, but it is just so hard to break through that programming. But, you know, more people are waking up. We are getting contacted by more younger mummies than ever, I think, asking about it all. So, you know, we've there's just too many bodies under the carpet. So they've done it to themselves. What can we say?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Aneeta. I knew it was going to be a fun chat. I was actually thinking just yesterday, one of your interviews, I can't remember who it was with now, and I had to clip it. And you just make me laugh. You've got such a dry sense of humor. And when you're going through like the ridiculousness of like whatever they're doing, you know, at the time. And I was just having a bit of a giggle and I was like, yeah, this is going to be a fun chat.
Well, Meryl and I always have a hilarious, like when we do podcasts, we're always, because if you don't, you won't stay sane. If you don't find the humor and just try and keep it light, you would go absolutely crazy. So no, it's, we try to keep it as light as possible because it's pretty dark. So if you don't stay sane.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for our audience, and we'll have all the links in the show notes, but where can people find you guys and get involved, all our different avenues? I was going to say, I probably know more of the avenues than you do.
You probably know more. I mean, our website is avn.org.au and you can sign up for our free newsletter there and contact us there. But I don't know, where are we on Instagram, Alexa?
Yeah, well, we're on Telegram, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter. They're the main ones now. So, yeah, but we'll have all the links in the show notes where people can get in touch and get involved. And, yeah, definitely recommend, especially I think it's a good place to send people that, like, if you already know this information, a lot of our audience do, but if people are starting to question or want some information, there's so many resources on the website especially. But then we're always posting, you know, more recent updates on the socials.
Yeah, I'm going to go check out some of those books too that
they sound awesome.
Do you know if you sell any of the books about schooling on the AVN website?
No, we've never sold those. No, it's mainly vaccines and health stuff on the website. No, I got all mine on, probably Book Depository many moons ago when it was still a thing. No, so Amazon for all those. But I don't know if you'll still find Fear of the Invisible, which isn't about schooling, but the Fear of the Invisible we used to sell when it was still published. But I mean, if you could find a secondhand copy of that anywhere, people like that, I would say that is the book that blew my mind scientifically on all the virology stuff. It is mind blowing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's good to see that you guys are on that side of it as well, because that's the next logical thing. So you're definitely leading and heading in the right direction. And I hope our listeners, you know, take a little bit of a look outside of the school system, Try to imagine what it would be like if your kids had a life similar to what you described with yours. It sounds absolutely amazing. I've lived part of that from my childhood, my daughter as well, and it's a great way to grow up. So I'm excited to see and hear what these next generations do without all the burdens that society tries to put on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my final thought on that is when I first made the decision to unschool and I was freaking out, I just said, in 20 years' time, will I really regret giving them these thousands and thousands of hours to themselves, to get to know themselves, to get them to enjoy life? Will I regret that? And I couldn't ever see that I would regret doing that. And I haven't. It was the best decision I ever made.
Amen.
Amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, mic drop. End it right there.
All right.
Thanks, Aneeta.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Natural AF. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed recording it and putting it out there for you. These episodes are a lot of fun. They're always packed with some kind of gold nugget or something valuable that you can share with family or friends, someone in your friend circle that might get a lot out of this. You can check our show notes for the link tree, which is where all the places that we can be found for audio or video podcasts. Rumble and YouTube are the best for video. You can like us and share us a comment on there, reach out to us. And also Substack, if you want to leave us a comment or send up a message, the link tree has our Substack as well. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a rating or review. And that actually makes it come up in more people's feeds and spreads the word and makes us easier to find. We appreciate everyone's effort and support for helping the show grow. And we will see you next week on Natural AF.